God, family, country. What do I want to talk about tonight? I had a whole podcast planned out. I knew exactly what I was going to talk about. I had other podcasts lined up, actually time sensitive, meaning that, I need to put it out. And then I seen something and knew that I had to talk about it and put it out. Since I started the podcast, I started putting out short clips on YouTube of the podcast and then of relevant stuff for God, family, country around those subjects or, whatever I want to talk about, just as long as it's, centered in our beliefs and our core. And what I saw a lot of, to my surprise, was people were hitting this video on resisting the devil. It was the title that I think grabbed them. It was a prayer to resist the devil. And so what I realized was that there's a lot of people that were struggling with this area, and they were looking for this area, and they were looking, for some sort of recipe that would help them with. And I knew that this would be a good conversation, but this would be a one of many conversation, a conversation that we kind of build upon. So, resisting the devil and his evil ways. A lot of people are looking for a special prayer, and the only prayer that Jesus really gives us, the Bible gives us, is Our Father who art in heaven. As we're going to start this conversation, I want you guys to be ready to take some mental notes or actual notes. You maybe pull over at the end of this. Just imagine like this is a conversation between me and you. You're going to have thoughts in your head as well that are going to apply to your life and what you're going through, because I can't possibly know what all of you guys are going through, but definitely God does. And before I even did this podcast, I asked God that that one person, if I could just give them that gain, not me give them, but through me, allow them to overcome. It's all worth the whole podcast is a success for this episode. Write some notes in your phone, record a voice memo so that you can grow from this. And like I said, we're going to build on this, because this is a problem that we're all going through. And it's easy to preach from a pedestal. And what I mean from that is, somebody who's doing great and not having any problems or has been there before sometimes can forget what it feels like to be in the battlefield and going through it in real time. So I thought, let's pull from our past experiences, and maybe some of us are going through some real life experiences right now on trying to resist the devil. In James chapter 4, verse 4, it says, "You adulterous people, don't you know that friendship with the world is hostility towards God? Whoever wants to be a friend of the world becomes the enemy of God." This right here starts us resisting the devil. We got to see where our friendship lies. In our actions, not in our words. Because, when I wasn't walking, or when I had strayed or was backsliding and playing that game for however long I chose to play it, one day is too long. But I would, with my words, call myself a friend of God, and that I didn't really like the devil too much. I don't think anybody that I hung around did. I don't think if I looked at the qualities of what a friend is and what a friend does and how a friend acts, if I could qualify myself as a friend of God and an enemy of Satan. Right here it says, "You adulterous people, don't you know that friendship with the world is hostility towards God?" That cake and eat it too scenario is really just never going to work out for you. You can see right now that if you are having problems resisting the devil and you have a friendship with the world, it's going to be hostility towards God. That's what God calls it. And I want you to pay attention to this. And if you are getting maybe upset by that statement, or that statement bothers you, I think that's good, because I think we want to look at that down the line. What James is really saying is for you to stop having this relationship with the world. You're flirting with the devil. You got to make the choice to be an enemy of the world and of the devil, and you do so by aligning yourself with God. How do we align ourselves? How do we be a friend of God and an enemy of the world? And how do we align ourselves? And we really just need to do a self-inventory. If we look at ourselves and we say, who am I aligned with? What, at the end of the day, the sum of me, what is it aligned with? What's my lifestyle aligned with? I think that's going to be the most important thing. And you can just kind of look and take inventory, like I said, of what you do, what you think, what your activities are, where you're going, where you're headed, what your plans are, what your ambitions, your dreams, your passions. And you could write those down. You could write down God and the Word of God and what God's instructions are for you and see if that lines up. If it doesn't line up, not the greatest thing. I would say good because now we have a starting point to align it, not good that it's not aligning up. Another thing I say is, I was talking about is, how do we become a friend of God? I think to become a friend of God, you kind of got to know where He is. So to know where God is, you have to seek Him. And one of the things that we learned by seeking God is through time with Him, through prayer, and through worship. And just through, I call prayer conversation. It's one thing to get down on your knees and to pray to God in a fashion where you're kind of just spending time in prayer, maybe praying heavily over something. And there's also another thing to, I guess it would be considered prayer as well, where you're just talking to God about your day. You're talking to Him like a friend on the phone. And I'm not saying to do that disrespectfully. If this really is the creator of the universe and He sent His only Son to have a relationship with you, don't you think He wants to hear from you and have a conversation? One of the things that I think is good is to seek God. These are some of the ways that we seek Him. The ways that we have besides that is worship, and we have reading the Word of God. If we put all those things into practice, it would really help us out. And maybe we look and see if those things are even into practice and see if we even want to do those things. The excuses that come up now are time. I love to destroy excuses, especially with myself. And I know that there's valid reasons, but truly at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're choosing something that has higher value over this or that. And we're making an excuse to justify it with a list of excuses to validate the excuse. When we try to say, well, I don't have time to, well, you're driving to work, you could talk to God. When you're waiting in line, you can talk to God. There's always times to spend time with God. It doesn't have to always be in prayer, like on your knees, or you're able to set a time alone and spending time with God. Most of my time with God is in the car, talking to Him, having a conversation audibly. Nowadays I can get away with it because people just probably think I'm talking to someone on my car phone. And I'm really just talking to God. So if we're going to resist the devil, who's the only person that can resist the devil? Because obviously you can look through the Bible. We're not strong enough on our own strength. The only person, I wouldn't call it person. The only way to resist the devil is to seek God and have God resist the devil for you. There's things that we can put in play. We can't sit there aimlessly. We need to be proactive by doing our part. But God ultimately comes and takes care of that in the grand scheme of things. By seeking God, we are able to draw closer to God. And I just want to go over some verses because I looked at seeking God pretty intensely a year or two ago, and I have an extensive study on it, and I just want to go over a couple of verses that help you kind of understand what it is to seek God. So in 2 Chronicles 7:14, it says, "If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and heal their land." So they're stuck in sin. They are needing forgiveness in sin, and their land is a mess. Remind you of anywhere? So God gives them instructions, a prescription, a recipe, if you will, and says, if my people who are called by my name. So these people seem like they're already believers. They already know who God is. And they might need to do some resisting of the devil. If they will just humble themselves, and what's it say? And pray, and not just pray, but pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and heal their land. So I think that's really important. When we're looking at resisting the devil and looking for a special prayer, here, this prayer comes with instructions. It's saying to humble yourself, to pray and seek God's face, and to turn from the wicked ways. And then what's he say? He says, I will hear from heaven. I'm going to forgive your sin and heal your land. I'm going to read one more that's in there. I highlighted it. And this one's in 2 Chronicles chapter 20, verse 3. It says, a great battle was coming. And what he did was he set himself to seek the Lord and proclaimed a fast through all of Judah. Now in the next verse, all of Judah came together for help from God. They came to seek the Lord. So when they were going to go to war, he set himself apart to seek the Lord. Yeah, I don't know who the person's name is off the top of my hand because I didn't write it down on the notes. My notes are about seeking. What's important about Chronicles 20 verse 3 is they were setting themselves aside and seeking the Lord, and they also fasted because a great war was coming. I feel like that's really important because resisting the devil is a chore, is more than a chore. It's a war. It's all out spiritual warfare. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood. These are the words of the Holy Bible. So we know these things. So if we're wrestling, then that means we're fighting. If we're fighting, then that means we're at war. And if we're at war, then it is a great battle to fight angels that were once in heaven and a third of them fell. So a great battle was coming. So a great battle you may be going through right now. And I can tell you that you got to set yourself aside time to seek the Lord and fast. Maybe you're like, oh, I have a medical condition, I have to eat this and that. Well, you could still fast a lot of different ways. There's things that maybe are your enjoyables that you have on your diet. Maybe you cut those out and you kind of cut that flesh off and feed that spirit by spending time with the Lord and seeking him. And I can't tell you why God has chosen to pair prayer with fasting, but Jesus fasted in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights when he was being tempted by the devil. So when he went to go get tempted, he fasted. When he was going through what we know as publicly the longest duration of temptation, which is a long time now that I think of it, he decided to fast and pray. So that is what I feel will help you on resisting the devil, is that you have to seek him. Next is we got to see, who are we submitting to in life? So in James 4, if we go back to James 4, this time in verse 7, it says to submit to God. And you can see that prayer and seeking God's face from the previous verses I read. And that's, submitting to God, to put yourself under God's authority and rule. So we're not resisting God, we're actually resisting the devil. You can't expect to resist the devil while resisting God in your life. That seems like an oxymoron. Is that the word for it? I'm not sure. But it seems like something that's really not feasible. You need God to resist the devil, but if you resist God, you can't resist the devil. We need to think about this a little and think about what we submit to. And in verse 8 of James, it also says, draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Again, the Bible, when I was doing this seek, I just have pages and pages right now of just seeking God, Old Testament, New Testament, time and time again seeking. Drawing near to God is seeking. It says if you draw near to God, he will draw near to you. That is super important to know that, okay, so I'm trying to resist the devil. What do I need to do? I need to align with God. I need to seek him. I need to turn away from sin. I need to resist the devil and stop resisting God. I need to draw near to God, and he will draw near to me. I would ask you right now, as you're thinking about, maybe when you turn this on, you were like, man, resist the devil? That's me. Like, I need to hear this. This was for me. I would ask you, so far, are all these checks marked off? Are we actively at least trying? In retrospect, we could always find a reason or a way that, hey, we could have did that better. We dropped the ball here and there. But I'm saying God is faithful in your imperfectness. God is perfect. So if you're wholeheartedly checking those boxes off, and maybe you need to look and say, well, am I really wholeheartedly? Am I being ridiculous, or am I playing myself and not really checking off those boxes? So yeah, verse 8 says, draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Another thought is, we can't resist the devil if we're not in fellowship and communion with God. You know what fellowship is? You got to be hanging out with God. And that's what I was going over earlier, is asking God to bless your food, asking God, like, hey, it's nighttime, if thanks for the day, and hey, hopefully nothing happens to me. Protect me while I sleep. It's good. But to think that that's fellowship, shame on us. Shame on me at even times, thinking that's fellowship. I think that we need to have true fellowship. Like I said, are you a good friend of God's? Do you hang out? Are you spending time? Those are the questions that we need to ask. And these are not like one-time things that we check off. We're like, okay, I did that. That was Monday through Friday. No, these are wake up and do time and time again. It takes 21 days to form a habit. So if you're, just getting this and you're taking notes and you're like, hey, we're going to knock all these things out. Maybe there's some things that you're like, duh, why didn't I think of that? Or I already knew that, but I just wasn't thinking of that. So I'm going to put that up. A lot of times that's really what it is. It's just, we're so caught up in trying to do it all on our own that we don't see the simple things that God is showing us to be able to resist the devil. 21 days, you make a list of all the things that we should be doing to resist the devil, and then you have a habit. That's 3 weeks. 3 weeks from now, from you hearing this, you have a habit of resisting the devil, which I think is pretty awesome. And just because I like numbers and statistics, there's the 10,000 hour rule as well. Now, I don't know if you know or not, but 10,000 hours of anything makes you a pro. So how many hours in a year? Well, 8,765 hours in a year. So if you just make that declaration and you turn from whatever the devil's using to get access, and you're seeking God, and you're doing all these things, you'll be a professional year one. Just saying. Thank you for listening to God Family Country. Tune in next time for part 2 of Resisting the Devil. Hope you guys are getting fed and getting something from this. I definitely am getting something from this after editing it. Stay in that fight. Remember what we learned today. Apply it. Use it every day. Make it part of your toolkit. Stay faithful. Stay consistent. You got this. It's just us and God sometimes, and that's all we need. Stay blessed.